The keys hit the polished floor of Naval Special Warfare Command headquarters at 5:47 hours, the metallic clatter echoing through the pre-dawn silence like a gunshot. Master Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thorne looked up from his coffee, watched the janitor, late 40s, slight build, maintenance uniform 2 sizes too large, kneel to retrieve them. Something about the movement caught his attention. Not the apology that followed, mumbled and reflexive, but the way those hands moved. Deliberate. Efficient. The same economy of motion Thorne had seen in operators who'd spent decades in the teams. The janitor's badge read Rays, E, and bore the contractor logo that serviced the building. Nothing unusual there. Half the support staff were contractors. But when Rays bent to gather those keys, his jacket shifted. Just for a second. Long enough for Thorne to see what hung from the key ring beside the building access cards and locker tags, a small metal trident. Not the polished brass version sold in Navy exchange gift shops. This one was worn smooth, edges softened by years of handling, the eagle's wings barely defined anymore. The kind operators kept long after they'd turned in their uniforms, tucked in dresser drawers or hanging in toolboxes, touchstones to lives they'd lived in shadows. Thorne's coffee cooled, forgot. He'd been in naval special warfare for 23 years. He knew every SEAL who'd ever walked these halls or thought he did. But Rays. The name didn't register. The man stood, keys secured, and moved down the corridor with a mop bucket, methodical and unremarkable, just another invisible worker maintaining the spaces where America's most elite warriors planned operations that would never make headlines. Thorne pulled out his phone, pulled up the personnel database he wasn't technically supposed to access off-duty, searched for Rays. Found an Edwin Rays contracted through Triton Services, background check cleared 18 months ago, no military service listed. Standard civilian hire. He looked up. The corridor was empty now except for the faint smell of industrial cleaner and the soft squeak of wheels from somewhere deeper in the building. The night duty officer walked past, nodded. Early start, Master Chief. Thorne grunted acknowledgement, but his mind was elsewhere. In the teams, you learned to trust your instincts. That trident wasn't borrowed, wasn't stolen. It was earned, which meant Edwin Rays, contractor janitor, single father according to the brief personnel file, was either the victim of identity theft or he was a ghost. And ghosts in this world usually had reasons for staying dead. By the time the sun broke over Coronado, Thorne had made a decision that would unravel a story 20 years buried. Edwin Rays had learned long ago that invisibility was a skill more valuable than marksmanship. He'd mastered it the same way he'd mastered everything else, through repetition, discipline, and the understanding that survival often meant becoming forgettable. At 6:30 he clocked out, walked 3 blocks to the rusted Toyota Corolla that had somehow limped past 200,000 miles, and drove 15 minutes to the apartment complex where the paint peeled and the parking lot cracks grew wider every winter. Unit 2B home. Inside, his daughter slept in the bedroom he'd given her, the one with the window that actually opened, while he took the converted living room nook behind a curtain he'd hung from tension rods. 8 years old. Maya. Named for her grandmother, a woman who died before Edwin could introduce them, another casualty of choices he'd made in deserts whose names remained classified. The apartment smelled like the vanilla air freshener he bought in bulk from the dollar store, attempting to mask the underlying staleness that came with buildings built in the 70s and maintained with the minimum legal effort. He moved quietly, habit, checking the locks on the door, 3 of them, 2 he'd installed himself, and the window latches. The baseball bat leaning in the corner near the kitchen was aluminum, well balanced. The kitchen knife block was missing the 2 largest knives. One was under his mattress. The other was in the car. These weren't paranoid precautions. They were protocols learned in places where relaxation meant death, adapted to a civilian life that felt more foreign than Kandahar ever had. He showered, changed into the other maintenance uniform he owned, identical to the first, washed in the bathtub last night and hung to dry, and started breakfast. Eggs, toast, the routine of normalcy he'd constructed from the wreckage of everything else. Maya emerged at 7:15, right on schedule, hair tangled and eyes heavy with sleep. She wore the Captain America pajamas he'd found at Goodwill, too big but she loved them. "Morning, kiddo." She mumbled something approximating a greeting, slumped into her chair. He plated her breakfast, poured orange juice from concentrate, watched her eat with the intensity of someone who'd seen starvation. She was healthy, fed, safe. The three things he'd sworn to provide no matter what it cost him, no matter what he'd become to ensure it. The drive to her school took 12 minutes, traffic permitting. Edison Elementary, public, overcrowded, but the teachers cared and the neighborhood was stable enough. He walked her to the gate, watched her meet her friend Kiara, another 8-year-old who talked too much and made Maya laugh, before heading back to the car. Another job started in 45 minutes. Office building downtown, 3 floors, 4 hours of work. Then a lunch shift at the warehouse district facility. Then back to NAVSPCWRCOM for the evening cleaning rotation. 3 jobs, sometimes 4. Enough to cover rent, food, Maya's needs. Barely. The child support from Rachel had stopped 18 months ago when she'd moved to Phoenix with her new husband, a software engineer who'd never spent a night in a fighting hole and never would. The legal fight to enforce the support order would cost more than he'd recover, so he worked. And he stayed invisible. Because Edwin Reyes, decorated SEAL operator, recipient of 2 Silver Stars and a Navy Cross, veteran of 7 combat deployments across 3 theaters, didn't officially exist anymore. The man who did exist was dead. Buried in a cemetery in Arlington with full honors and a ceremony, Edwin had watched from a distance, behind sunglasses and a baseball cap, while his former teammates eulogized a hero who died in an operation that never happened in a country the U.S. wasn't officially operating in. They'd given him a choice afterward. The brass in their pressed uniforms with their earnest faces. Take the death, take the new identity, keep the pension but never acknowledge who he'd been. Or go public with what had happened in that village, face the consequences of classified operations exposed, and watch the entire strategic house of cards collapse. He'd chosen invisibility. For Maya. Always for Maya. Master Chief Thorne spent the morning doing what SEALs did better than anyone, gathering intelligence. He started with the soft approach, conversations with other contractors, the kitchen staff, the security team at the front desk. Reyes, yeah, quiet guy, shows up, does his work, doesn't talk much. Been here about a year and a half maybe, never late, never complains. Single dad, I think. Saw him once at the grocery store with a little girl, looked exhausted. Nothing unusual. Nothing that explained the trident. Thorne escalated, called in a favor with a friend at NCIS, requested a deeper background check. By 1400 hours he had his answer. Edwin Reyes existed, born in San Diego, high school dropout, spotty employment history, no criminal record, no military service. But the employment gaps were interesting. 7 years, nothing. Then sporadic construction work. Then the contracting jobs. The timeline bothered Thorne. Those gaps aligned too perfectly with deployment cycles. And there was something else. A death certificate. Edwin Michael Reyes, Senior Chief Special Warfare Operator, killed in action February 14, 2022, in an undisclosed location during an undisclosed operation. Posthumous Navy Cross. Arlington burial. Full honors. Thorne sat back in his chair, the pieces assembling themselves with the inevitability of gravity. The Navy didn't fake deaths for fun. It did it to protect operators who'd been burned, exposed, or who'd witnessed things that could never see daylight. It did it when keeping someone alive was more dangerous than letting them die. Which meant the janitor mopping floors in his building was either an imposter using a dead SEAL's identity, or he was the dead SEAL himself, buried under bureaucracy and classification. Thorne checked the time. Evening cleaning shift started in 3 hours. Edwin returned to NAVSPCWARCOM at 17:45 hours, signed in at the desk, nodded to the security guard, Thompson, retired Marine, good guy, and wheeled his cart through the familiar corridors. The building was quieter in the evening. Most of the staff had gone home. Only the duty teams remained, planning operations or maintaining the endless cycle of readiness that defined naval special warfare. He cleaned methodically, muscle memory guiding him through offices and conference rooms. He'd learned every inch of this building, knew which doors were always locked, which spaces held the classified materials he wasn't supposed to see but sometimes glimpsed anyway. Old habits. You couldn't spend 15 years in intelligence-driven operations without learning to observe, to catalog, to remember. He was emptying a trash can in the third-floor briefing room when he felt it. The weight of observation. Someone watching. He turned. Master Chief Thorne stood in the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. The khaki uniform, the trident above the ribbons, the quiet authority of a senior enlisted leader who'd earned respect the hard way. Edwin recognized him. Everyone in the building recognized Thorne. Legend status. 3 decades in the teams. Combat experience stretching back to Panama. The kind of operator they built statues for. "Evening, Master Chief," Edwin said, voice neutral, janitor appropriate, deferential, forgettable. Thorne didn't respond immediately. He stepped into the room, closed the door behind him. The sound of the latch clicking seemed impossibly loud. "You dropped your keys this morning." Edwin's hands continued working, tying off the trash bag, replacing it. "Yes, sir, clumsy, won't happen again." "I saw the trident." The room's temperature seemed to drop. Edwin's hands stopped moving just for a second. Then continued. "Training. Never confirm, never deny, stay in character." "Don't know what you mean, Master Chief. Probably just a keychain. They sell them at the NEX. Not that kind of trident." The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. Edwin finished with the trash bag, moved to wipe down the conference table. His mind ran calculations. Threat assessment, exposure risk, extraction protocols he hadn't thought about in years but could never truly forget. Thorne watched him work for a full minute before speaking again. "Senior Chief Edwin Reyes, SEAL Team 3, later transferred to DEVGRU. 7 combat deployments. 2 Silver Stars, Bronze Star with V device, Navy Cross. KIA February 14, 2022, age 41. Edwin's hand stilled on the table's surface. "Hero's burial at Arlington," Thorne continued, voice soft. "I was there. Watched your team carry the casket, watched them fold the flag. Hell of a ceremony for a ghost." Edwin straightened, met Thorne's eyes for the first time. Recognition passed between them. The kind that only existed between men who'd lived certain lives, seen certain things. "That man's dead, Master Chief." "Yeah," Thorne said. "I read the file, very convincing, except he's standing in front of me holding a bottle of Windex." Edwin set the bottle down carefully. His shoulders sagged just slightly, the weight of 18 months of pretense suddenly too heavy. "You going to report this?" Thorne considered. In the hallway outside, footsteps passed. Voices. Normal evening activity. "Depends," Thorne said. "On what?" "On why you're here, mopping floors in the building where your brothers plan operations, where you should be planning operations." Edwin laughed, bitter and short. "You read the file, you know why. I know what the file says, I don't know the truth." Edwin looked at the window, the darkness beyond. Out there, teams were training, preparing, living the life he'd built and lost. "The truth got buried with my name." Thorne pulled out a chair, sat. An invitation. Edwin remained standing for a moment, every instinct screaming at him to stay invisible, to deflect, to walk away. But something in Thorne's expression, not pity, not judgment, just patient professional curiosity, made him sink into the opposite chair. "Yemen," Edwin said. 2022, off-the-books operation. We were hunting an HVT, a facilitator who'd been moving weapons to groups targeting U.S. interests in the Horn of Africa. Intelligence said he was operating out of a compound near Aden. Thorne nodded. He'd seen the type of operation 1,000 times, the kind that never made headlines unless they went wrong. "We hit the compound at 300, perfect execution. Found the HVT, found the weapons cache, found the documents linking him to attacks on 2 U.S. vessels. Textbook raid." Edwin's hands were flat on the table now, fingers spread. "We also found 12 kids, children, locked in a basement. Trafficked." The HVT wasn't just moving weapons, he was moving people. Thorne's expression didn't change, but Edwin saw the slight tightening around his eyes, recognition of a moral complexity that didn't fit in neat operational reports. The rules of engagement were clear. Secure the HVT, eliminate hostile threats, extract. Nothing about a dozen terrified kids who'd been beaten, starved, and worse. Taking them meant compromising the mission, extending our exposure, and creating an international incident if anyone found out we were there. So you took them, Thorne said. It wasn't a question. Edwin nodded. Modified the extraction plan, called in medevac, got those kids out, all 12, delivered them to a UN facility in Djibouti. They're alive because we broke protocol. And someone had a problem with that. Multiple someones, State Department, CIA. The operation was supposed to be invisible. Taking kids, involving the UN, creating witnesses, it exposed the entire thing. Suddenly there were questions. Who authorized U.S. forces in Yemen? What were we doing there? Why were we removing foreign nationals? The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, steady and indifferent. Edwin continued, his voice flat, reciting facts. The agency called it a compromise of national security. State called it a diplomatic nightmare. DOD called it unauthorized deviation from orders. My team lead backed the decision, said we made the right call. So did my platoon commander. Didn't matter. The brass needed someone to blame, and they couldn't afford questions about why we were running black ops in a country we weren't supposed to be in. Thorne leaned back, arms still crossed. So they killed you. Offered me a choice. Take the death, accept a new identity, keep my pension and benefits under a different name. Maya would be provided for. Or refuse, face court-martial for unauthorized actions, and watch them classify everything so heavily that the truth would never see light. Either way, the operation would disappear. Only question was whether I'd disappear with it or spend 10 years in Leavenworth. Hell of a choice. No choice at all, Edwin said. Maya was 6. Her mother had already left, couldn't handle the deployments, the stress. Maya needed a parent, she needed stability, so I took the deal. Edwin Ray's senior chief died in combat, heroic, clean. They gave me, a Navy Cross and a plot in Arlington. And Edwin Ray's janitor got a GED equivalency, a social security number, and a fresh start. Thorne was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the building's heating system kicked on, a low mechanical rumble through the walls. You saved 12 kids. I ruined an operation, compromised national security, take your pick. And now you're here, cleaning toilets in the building where your teammates work. Edwin stood, retrieved his cleaning supplies. I'm here because rent's due on the 15th and Maya needs new shoes. The jobs pay. The work's honest. And yeah, maybe there's some twisted part of me that needs to be close to this world even if I can't be in it anymore. Thorne stood as well, moved to the door but didn't open it. How many people know? About me? No one. You're the first to figure it out. The teams that knew me think I'm dead. The brass that buried me have no reason to check on a janitor. I'm a ghost, Master Chief, and ghosts stay quiet. Thorne studied him, and Edwin saw the calculation happening, a decision being weighed. Then Thorne reached into his pocket, pulled out a business card, set it on the table. My personal number. You need anything, trouble, help, whatever you call. Edwin looked at the card but didn't touch it. Why? Because what you did in Yemen was right, because those 12 kids are alive, because you chose honor over orders, and because SEALs take care of SEALs, even the dead ones. Thorne opened the door, paused. Keep your head down, stay invisible, but know this, if you ever need your brothers, we're still here. He left. Edwin stood alone in the briefing room, Thorne's card on the table, the weight of recognition both terrifying and oddly comforting. He picked up the card, slipped it into his pocket, and went back to work. Invisible, but maybe, for the first time in 18 months, not quite alone. The days that followed maintained their rhythm. Edwin woke before dawn, made breakfast, drove Maya to school, worked his rotation of jobs, picked her up, helped with homework, made dinner, put her to bed. The routine of survival, but something had shifted. Thorne didn't approach him again, but Edwin felt the awareness now. The way other SEALs in the building looked at him slightly longer. The nod from a lieutenant commander who'd never acknowledged him before. Nothing overt. Nothing that would draw attention. But the invisible lines of tribal recognition had been drawn. Edwin was being seen. One evening, finishing the second-floor offices, he found an envelope taped to his cleaning cart. Inside, cash, $300, no note. He asked Thompson at the security desk. Someone left this for me? Thompson shrugged. Didn't see anything, brother. Maybe it's tips. It wasn't tips. The bills were crisp, sequential, the kind of money that came from a group pooling resources. Edwin pocketed it, said nothing, but that night Maya got the new shoes she needed and he bought groceries without calculating every dollar. The following week, another envelope, this time 500. With it, a single word on a scrap of paper. Brothers. Edwin's hands shook reading it. He'd chosen invisibility to protect Maya, to avoid the complexities of his past dragging her into danger. But his brothers, men who understood sacrifice, who valued the same code he'd lived by, were refusing to let him disappear completely. He couldn't acknowledge it, couldn't thank them. Doing so would break the silence that kept him safe. But he could honor it by continuing to be the father Maya needed, by maintaining the life he'd built from ashes, by surviving with dignity. 3 months after Thorne's discovery, the building's rhythm changed. Increased security, more vehicles in the lot. The tension that preceded major operations, a frequency Edwin recognized in his bones. Something was happening. He cleaned through it, invisible as always, but his operators' instincts cataloged everything. Team deployments, briefing schedules, the way conversations stopped when he entered rooms. On a Tuesday evening, mopping the third-floor corridor, he heard voices from the command center. The door was ajar, protocol violation. He should report it. Instead, he moved closer, not entering, just near enough to hear. Confirmation from assets in Mogadishu. The facilitator has 12 children, same MO as the Yemen operation. Edwin's blood went cold. State wants it clean, no witnesses, no complications. We go in, eliminate the target, destroy the evidence, extract. What about the kids? That was Thorne's voice. Not our problem. Focus is the target. Kids complicate exfil. We're not running a rescue operation. Edwin's hand tightened on the mop handle. He knew this script, had lived it, knew exactly how it ended. The door opened fully. Thorne stood there, locked eyes with Edwin. A moment passed, recognition, understanding. Thorne stepped into the hallway, closed the door behind him. You heard. Edwin nodded. Yemen again. Different country, same playbook. Thorne's jaw was tight. Orders are clear, target only. Kids are collateral concerns, not mission critical. Collateral, Edwin repeated, tasting the bitterness. 12 human beings are collateral. I know. You going to follow those orders? Thorne met his gaze. What would you do? Edwin looked down the corridor, toward the exit, toward the parking lot where his rusted Corolla waited, toward the life of invisibility he'd chosen. Then he looked back at Thorne. Same thing I did before. The impossible request hung in the air between them. Edwin could see Thorne processing it, running calculations that had nothing to do with tactics and everything to do with consequences. You're asking me to compromise a classified operation, Thorne said quietly. I'm saying those kids don't deserve to die because it's inconvenient to save them. You know what happened to you. You know what they'll do. I know exactly what they'll do, Edwin interrupted. I'm already dead, remember. What's the worst they can do? Kill me again? Thorne glanced back at the command center door. I have a career, a team depending on me. This could end everything. Edwin picked up his mop, started working again. Then forget we had this conversation. I'm just a janitor. What do I know? He moved down the corridor, but Thorne's voice stopped him. The operation launches in 72 hours. Edwin didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge, just kept mopping. But the information settled into his mind like coordinates on a map, tactical data filing itself into patterns he'd thought he'd left behind. That night, after Maya was asleep, Edwin sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and began writing. Not plans, not tactics, a letter, to Maya, to be opened if something happened, to explain why her father made certain choices, why honor sometimes cost everything, why 12 children in Mogadishu mattered as much as one 8-year-old girl in San Diego. He sealed it, addressed it to his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, a retired teacher who watched Maya sometimes, who'd become the closest thing to family they had. Then he retrieved the business card Thorne had given him, the one he'd carried every day since, and pulled out his phone. The call was brief, 3 sentences. Thorne's response was silence then. You understand what you're risking? Yeah, Edwin said. Same thing I risked in Yemen, and I'd do it again. The plan came together with the inevitability of muscle memory. Edwin couldn't join the operation. He had no authority, no official standing, no legal right to involve himself in classified military actions. But he had knowledge, 20 years of accumulated experience in exactly this type of operation. And he had brothers who, despite orders, despite regulations, remembered what it meant to be a SEAL. The tribe protected its own. And 12 kids in Mogadishu were now part of that tribe, whether the brass acknowledged it or not. Thorne's team launched on schedule. Edwin worked his shift at NAVSBCWARCOM, mopping floors and emptying trash, maintaining the invisibility that had become his armor. But his phone, tucked in his pocket, remained on, encrypted, connected to a network that shouldn't exist but did, maintained by operators who understood that some communications needed to exist outside official channels. At 3:47 hours San Diego time, a message appeared. On target, 12 packages confirmed. Complications. Edwin's hands stilled on the mop. He moved to an empty office, closed the door, typed, exfil options, orders unchanged, target only. Edwin closed his eyes, saw Maya sleeping. Saw 12 other children, nameless, faceless, but no less real. Saw the choice he'd made once before and the price he'd paid. Typed, override orders, extract all packages, authorization raise senior chief. The response took 60 seconds. Raise is dead. Edwin's fingers moved. Raise is dead. His honor isn't. Get those kids out. Another pause, longer, then, Roger, extracting all packages. Command will have our asses. Yeah, Edwin typed. They will. He deleted the conversation, pocketed the phone, and went back to mopping. His hands were steady. His decision was made. Whatever came next, those 12 kids would live, just like the 12 before them. That had to be enough. The operation succeeded. The team extracted all 12 children along with the target, delivered them to UN protection in Nairobi, and returned to Coronado 18 hours later. The official after-action report noted complications requiring expanded extraction parameters and successful neutralization of HVT with additional humanitarian outcome. State Department was furious. CIA was furious. Someone in the Pentagon made angry phone calls, but the kids were safe. And the operation remained classified. No headlines, no exposure, just 12 more children who would grow up instead of dying in darkness. Edwin learned this through careful observation. The increased security presence at NAVSBCWARCOM, the closed-door meetings, the tension in hallways that gradually dissipated over the following week, and through one more envelope on his cleaning cart. Inside, no money this time, just a patch, the seal trident, and a note in Thorne's handwriting. Some of us still remember what the trident means. Stay invisible, brother, we'll handle the heat. Edwin held the patch for a long moment, then tucked it into his wallet next to Maya's school picture. That evening, he picked up Maya from school. She was excited about a science project, talking rapidly about volcanoes and baking soda reactions. He listened, made appropriate responses, and drove them home through traffic that felt lighter somehow. Made dinner. Helped with homework. Read her a chapter from the book they were working through. Tucked her in, kissed her forehead, whispered, "Love you, kiddo." "Love you too, Dad." He stood in the doorway, watching her settle into sleep, and felt the weight of his choices press down with familiar heaviness. He'd saved 24 children now, at the cost of his identity, his career, his place in the community he'd served. But Maya was safe. Those kids were safe. That had to be enough. 4 months later, Edwin was cleaning the first-floor conference room when the Admiral walked in. Vice Admiral Richard Keating, Naval Special Warfare Command. 3 stars. The man whose signatures had likely been on the orders that killed Edwin Reyes and created the janitor who stood before him now. Edwin straightened, fell into the automatic respect posture drilled into him through decades of service. "Admiral," Keating studied him. Probably mid-60s, gray hair precisely cut, uniform immaculate. Eyes that had seen too much and understood more. "You're Reyes," not a question. Edwin's pulse quickened, but his face remained neutral. "Yes, sir, Edwin Reyes, contractor maintenance. I know who you are, both versions." The room suddenly felt smaller. Edwin calculated distances to exits, threat assessments, the absurdity of thinking in tactical terms while holding a bottle of glass cleaner. "I should clarify, sir." Keating raised a hand. "Save it. I didn't come here for lies. I came to deliver a message." Edwin waited. Keating moved to the window, looked out at the training compounds beyond. Master Chief Thorne is retiring, effective end of month. Full honors ceremony, the works. 28 years of service, he's earned it. Edwin said nothing. Understood this was coming, but not why the Admiral was delivering it personally. The operation in Mogadishu was successful. The HVT was eliminated. 12 children were saved from trafficking and exploitation. State Department filed complaints. CIA raised concerns, but the outcome was objectively positive. Those kids are alive and recovering. Keating turned from the window. It was also a direct violation of orders, unauthorized expansion of mission parameters, potential compromise of operational security. By regulations, everyone involved should face disciplinary action. Sir, but regulations also require evidence. And the official record shows Master Chief Thorne followed orders precisely. The children were an unexpected tactical discovery requiring immediate humanitarian response. All decisions were made by on-ground leadership in accordance with established protocols. Keating's expression was unreadable. Convenient how the record shows that. Edwin understood then. The Admiral knew about Yemen, about Mogadishu, about the chain of decisions that linked them, and was choosing deliberately to look the other way. Why? Edwin asked. Keating smiled slightly. Because I was a lieutenant in Panama, 1989. We hit a facility, found civilians the intelligence hadn't mentioned. My co ordered me to leave them, maintain mission focus. I was young, stupid. I followed orders, came back the next day and found their bodies. Executed. Could have saved them, didn't. The Admiral's voice was quiet but firm. I got promoted, had a successful career, made Admiral, but I see those faces every time I close my eyes. So when Master Chief Thorne's report crossed my desk, when I recognized the patterns and started digging into Yemen, into your death, I had a choice. Enforce regulations or remember what we're supposed to be fighting for. Edwin felt something crack in his chest. Not quite hope, not quite vindication, just recognition that maybe sometimes the system still had room for honor. The teams need operators who remember that our job is protecting people, not just following orders, Keating continued. Senior Chief Reyes understood that, died for it according to the records, but if he were somehow still alive, I'd want him to know something. Sir, his decision in Yemen was right. His influence on the Mogadishu operation was right. And while regulations require I maintain the fiction of his death, nothing prevents me from ensuring his daughter receives the survivor benefits she's entitled to, processed through proper channels under his legal civilian identity. Edwin's throat tightened. Those benefits, Maya's education, her healthcare, her future, had been part of the deal, but navigating them through his death had been deliberately complicated. Thank you, sir. Keating moved toward the door, paused. Stay invisible, Reyes. Keep being the father your daughter needs. But know this, what you did mattered. Those kids in Yemen are 15 now. Mogadishu kids will get there too. That's your legacy, not the trident in Arlington. The lives you chose to save. Keating left. Edwin stood alone in the conference room, glass cleaner still in hand, and allowed himself 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds to feel the weight lift slightly, to acknowledge that maybe his choices hadn't been mistakes but the only path available to someone who valued human life over operational convenience. Then he went back to work, because Maya needed new winter clothes, because rent was due, because invisible men didn't get the luxury of celebration. But that evening, driving home through San Diego traffic, Edwin allowed himself to imagine something he'd thought lost forever. The possibility that his daughter might someday understand why her father lived the way he did, why honor cost so much, and why it was worth paying. At a stoplight, his phone buzzed. Encrypted message from an unknown number. Yemen kids want to meet their guardian angel, arranged through intermediary. Next month if you're willing. Edwin stared at the message. Meeting them meant risk. Meant breaking deeper into the fiction of his death. Meant potential exposure. He thought about Maya. About her questions about his past, questions he deflected with vague answers and gentle redirection. About the day she might ask why he'd given up everything, and realize the answer might be worth the risk. He typed, "Send details." The light turned green. He drove toward home, toward his daughter, toward the complicated, beautiful, fragile life he'd built from the ashes of the one they'd taken from him. The Navy thought he was dead. The system thought he was defeated. But Edwin Ray's janitor, single father and guardian to children he'd never meet again, knew something they didn't. Ghosts could still change the world. They just had to be patient and invisible and willing to pay whatever price honor demanded. 6 weeks later, Edwin stood in a conference room in Geneva, watching 12 teenagers enter with their counselors. The Yemen group, now 15 and 16 years old, educated, recovering, alive. They didn't know his real name. The UN coordinator had introduced him as a friend of the team that rescued you, deliberately vague, protecting his anonymity. But when the oldest girl, Amira, he learned, approached and took his hand, she said something that broke through every defense he'd constructed. "You came back for us when you didn't have to." Edwin's carefully maintained composure wavered. "How did you?" "We remembered. The man who changed the plan, who argued with the others, who said we mattered." She gestured to the others, a mix of boys and girls who'd survived horrors Edwin couldn't imagine. "We are here because someone decided we were worth saving, so we decided to be worth it." They told him about their lives now, school, dreams, futures that had seemed impossible in that basement. A girl named Fatima wanted to be a doctor. A boy named Karim was learning computer programming. Amira studied law, wanted to fight trafficking. They'd taken their trauma and transformed it into purpose. Edwin listened, throat tight, understanding for the first time that his decision in Yemen hadn't just saved lives, it had created possibilities. These weren't victims anymore. They were survivors building meaningful existences from the second chance he'd helped give them. When the meeting ended, Amira hugged him. "Thank you for remembering we were human." He flew home the next day, returned to his routine. Maya, school, work, the rhythm of invisibility, but something had fundamentally shifted. He'd spent 18 months believing his sacrifice had cost him everything, his identity, his career, his place in the world. But Geneva showed him the truth. He traded one legacy for another. Senior Chief Reyes was remembered for tactical excellence and heroic death. Edwin Ray's janitor would be remembered by no one, except 24 children who lived because he'd chosen compassion over orders. The years unfolded with surprising gentleness. Maya grew, 10 years old, then 12, then 15. Smart, compassionate, curious about the world. She asked about his military service, knew he'd served, couldn't miss the discipline in his bearing, the way he approached problems, but he kept the details vague. "Just did my job," he'd say. "Try to help people." The envelopes continued, not regularly, but enough. Birthday gifts for Maya from anonymous donors. Scholarship information that appeared in their mailbox. A better apartment facilitated by a landlord who asked no questions. His brothers taking care of their own, maintaining the invisible network that defined the teams. Edwin worked. 3 jobs became 2 as Maya got older and expenses stabilized. He was there for every school event, every parent-teacher conference, every moment that mattered, present in a way he'd never been during his operational years. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd become a better father by losing his identity. Master Chief Thorne retired, but he'd stop by sometimes, casual conversations in parking lots. "How's Maya?" "Good, honor roll again. She knows what you gave up for her. She knows I love her, that's enough." Thorne would nod, understanding the complicated truth, that Maya couldn't know the full story without bearing its weight, that protecting her meant continuing the fiction. That love sometimes meant accepting misunderstanding. When Edwin turned 50, no ceremony marked it. Just another day, another shift, another evening helping Maya with calculus homework that made his head hurt. But he felt the accumulation of years, the slow shift from operator to father, from hero to ghost, from legend to the man who ensured the trash got emptied and the floors stayed clean. No glory, no recognition, just service of a different kind. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Maya was 17, applying to colleges, talking about pre-med programs with the determined focus she'd inherited from him. Edwin was driving to work when his phone rang. Encrypted number. "Reyes, it's Thorne, we've got a problem." Edwin pulled over, tension flooding back instantly. "Talk to me." "Mogadishu operation. One of the kids tracked down the team, wants to thank them publicly. Ceremony, media, the whole thing. Edwin's blood went cold. You told them no. She's not taking no. She's 18 now, emancipated, living in the States. Says she owes her life to the team and wants the world to know. The implications cascaded through Edwin's mind. Media attention meant investigation. Investigation meant questions about the operation. Questions meant examining the authorization chain. And that chain led directly back to a dead man who'd overridden orders from a janitor's encrypted phone. If this goes public, your cover's blown, Thorne finished. Yeah, and probably mine too for facilitating, along with everyone else in that chain. Edwin sat in his car watching morning traffic flow past, normal people living normal lives unaware of the complex shadows that protected them. What's her name? Amira, same girl who met you in Geneva. Of course it was. The one who'd seen through the anonymity, who'd recognized the man behind the operation. Can you convince her to back off? Would you? Thorne asked. If someone saved your life and you had a chance to honor them, would you stay silent? Edwin knew the answer. Honor demanded acknowledgement. Gratitude required expression. The same code he'd lived by was now threatening to destroy him. So what do we do? I've got a plan, Thorne said. You're not going to like it. The ceremony was scheduled for 3 months later. Naval Special Warfare Command, public recognition of humanitarian actions undertaken during classified operations. Carefully worded, deliberately vague, enough to satisfy Amira while protecting operational details. Edwin's role would be acknowledged differently, not as Senior Chief Reyes, that man was officially dead, but as a consultant who provided critical intelligence support. A civilian. A ghost who could appear briefly without fully materializing. Thorne's plan was elegant and terrifying. Edwin would attend, maintain his cover, allow Amira her moment, and then disappear back into invisibility, hoping the brief exposure didn't unravel 18 years of carefully constructed fiction. Maya knew something was happening. Edwin couldn't hide the tension completely. Dad, you okay? Just work stuff, kiddo. Nothing to worry about. She studied him with eyes too perceptive for 17. You've been different lately, distracted. He pulled her into a hug held on maybe too long. I love you, know that. Whatever happens, everything I've done has been to protect you. She pulled back, concerned. You're scaring me. Don't be scared, just remember, sometimes doing the right thing costs more than we want to pay, but it's still right. The day of the ceremony arrived with crystalline clarity. San Diego sky painfully blue. Edwin wore the only suit he owned, purchased from Goodwill, and drove to NAVSPCWARCOM with hands that remembered gripping rifles but now only held steering wheels and mop handles. Thompson at security recognized him, nodded. Big day, brother. Edwin signed in, not as a contractor, as a guest. The recognition felt surreal. The ceremony was in the main auditorium. Edwin stood in the back watching teams in dress uniforms file in. Recognized faces. Men he deployed with, trained with, bled with. Men who thought he was dead. Amira was there, poised and articulate, now a sophomore at Georgetown studying international law. She spoke clearly, emotionally, about the night she and 11 others had been saved from trafficking, about the team that had risked everything to extract them, about the second chances they'd been given. Admiral Keating presented commendations to Thorne's team. Handshakes, applause, recognition. Then Amira spoke again. But there was someone else. Someone whose name isn't on any official record, but whose voice changed everything that night. Who said we mattered. Who reminded these warriors that their job was protecting people, not just following orders. Edwin's pulse thundered. This wasn't the plan. She was going off script. I don't know his real name, but I want him to know we became people worth saving because he believed we already were. She looked directly at Edwin. Across the auditorium, through the crowd, locked eyes with him. Thank you. Whoever you are, thank you. The room stayed focused on the stage. No one followed her gaze, but Edwin felt the weight of recognition, the impossibility of remaining invisible when someone insisted on seeing you. After the ceremony, people mingled. Edwin moved toward the exit, intending to disappear before anyone could connect dots, but Thorne intercepted him. She knows. I figured. Says she won't expose you, just wanted you to know the kids remember. Edwin nodded, throat tight. started to turn away, but Thorne's hand on his shoulder stopped him. "There's someone who needs to meet you." Thorne led him through corridors Edwin knew by heart to a small conference room. Inside, Maya sat with Admiral Keating. Edwin's world tilted. "What? Sit down, Dad," Maya said. Her voice was calm but firm. "We need to talk about who you really are." The room felt impossibly small. Edwin looked at Thorne, at Keating, back to his daughter. "Maya, I can explain." "I know who you are," she interrupted. "Senior Chief Edwin Michael Reyes, Navy SEAL. KIA February 2022, except you're not dead. You're my dad, the janitor, the man who works 3 jobs to keep me fed and housed and safe." Edwin sank into a chair. "How long have you known?" "Since I was 13. Found your Navy Cross citation online. Saw the picture. Saw the dates that didn't match the stories you told me." She pulled out a printed page, the citation. His face, younger, harder in dress uniform. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because you were trying to protect me, and I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." She looked at Keating. "But then the Admiral showed up at my school last week." Keating took over. "I came to inform Maya that her father's survivor benefits had been fully processed, and that she deserved to understand why her father made the choices he did." Edwin's hands clenched. "You had no right." "I had every right," Keating countered. "That young woman is about to attend college on scholarships funded by donations from Naval Special Warfare community members who know exactly who her father is. She deserves the truth." Maya stood, moved to Edwin, took his hands. "Dad, I'm not angry, I'm proud. You gave up everything to save children, to save me. To do what was right when it cost you everything." Tears he'd held for years threatened to break through. "I couldn't tell you, couldn't risk dragging you into." "I know, and I understand, but I'm not a kid anymore. I'm going to college, starting my own life. And I refuse to build that life on lies about who my father is." She squeezed his hands. "You're a hero, Dad, not because you died, because you lived. Because you chose us, me and those kids, over glory." The dam broke. Edwin pulled Maya into his arms and allowed himself to finally, fully grieve for the identity he'd lost, the career that ended, the brothers he'd left behind, but also to accept the trade he'd made. Maya had grown into a remarkable young woman. 24 children lived who otherwise wouldn't have. That was his legacy. Not the trident in Arlington, but the lives saved by a ghost who refused to follow orders that demanded cruelty. When he could speak again, he asked Keating, "What happens now?" The Admiral leaned back. "Officially, nothing. Edwin Reyes, the senior chief, remains dead. Records stay classified. Your cover remains intact. And unofficially, your daughter knows the truth. Your brothers know the truth, and that's enough." He stood. "The teams take care of their own, Reyes, living or dead. You've spent 18 years taking care of everyone else. Time to let us take care of you." Keating left. Edwin and Maya sat in silence for a moment. Thorne, still present, spoke quietly. "Your dad saved my life in Fallujah. I've owed him for 15 years. Taking care of you while he stayed invisible was the least I could do." Maya looked at him. "You've been watching us. A lot of us have, making sure the bills got paid, making sure you were safe, making sure your dad's sacrifice meant something." He stood. "Your pack, Maya, both of you. That doesn't change just because one of you is officially dead." He left them alone, father and daughter, ghost and future. Edwin looked at Maya, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time, not as the child he'd been protecting, but as the woman she'd become. "I'm sorry I lied." "You didn't lie, you protected me. There's a difference." She smiled. "Besides, I'm going into pre-med. I'll probably end up doing Doctors Without Borders or something equally crazy. Apparently risking everything for strangers runs in the family." Edwin laughed, broken and genuine. "You're extraordinary. I learned from the best." She hugged him. "So what now?" "Now I still have a shift tonight. Toilets don't clean themselves." "Dad, I'm serious. The cover holds. I stay invisible. That's the deal. But now you know, and that changes everything." He stood, helped her up. "Come on, I'll buy you lunch before I go to work. We've got 18 years of truth to catch up on." They left the building together. As they walked through the parking lot, Edwin noticed something. SEALs in the compound stopped what they were doing, turned, and one by one, in perfect silence, rendered salutes. Not to the janitor, not to the ghost, but to Senior Chief Reyes, the operator who'd chosen honor over orders, consequences be damned. Edwin didn't return the salutes. couldn't without breaking cover. But he met each man's eyes, nodded acknowledgement, and felt the weight of recognition settle into something sustainable. Later that evening, after lunch with Maya, after dropping her home, Edwin returned to NAVSPCWARCOM for his shift. Thompson at security handed him his badge. "Good ceremony today, Senior Chief." Edwin smiled slightly. "Just Ray's, the other guy's dead." "Sure he is," Thompson said, "but he'd be proud of who you became." Edwin cleaned the building he knew better than anywhere except the combat zones he'd never see again. He emptied trash, mopped floors, wiped down surfaces. The work was honest, necessary, and no longer felt like defeat. Around 2200 hours finishing the third floor, he found one last envelope on his cart. Inside, a photograph. The Mogadishu children, all 12, now teenagers. They stood together holding a banner, "Still here because someone cared." And beneath it, in Amira's handwriting, "Thank you, Guardian, we'll make it worth it." Edwin tucked the photo in his wallet next to Maya's picture, 2 generations saved by decisions made in darkness. He finished his shift, clocked out, drove home through the San Diego night. The apartment was dark except for the light Maya had left on in the kitchen. A note on the counter, "Love you, Dad. Thanks for being the man you are, not the one they tried to bury." Edwin read it twice, then moved to the window. Looked out at the city stretching toward the harbor, toward the bases where his brothers trained, toward the world they protected. He was 52 years old, officially dead, working as a janitor, single father, ghost. But those 24 children were alive. Maya was thriving. And somewhere in classified files no one would read for 50 years, the truth existed. Sometimes the greatest warriors are the ones who refuse to let honor die, even when the cost is everything. Edwin turned off the light, checked the locks, 3 of them habit, and went to bed. Tomorrow he'd wake up before dawn, make breakfast, and do it all again. Invisible, honorable, and finally, impossibly, at peace with the man he'd become.